The room wasn't just quiet, which is tense, the kind of silence that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Cameras were already live, red lights blinking, phones raised, mics clipped. Reporters sat at the edge of their chairs, like they knew something big was coming, but didn't know what. Water pitchers stood full, untouched. Even the flags behind the desk seemed stiff, like they were watching too. And then, the doors opened. Jasmine Crockett didn't walk in like a guest. She entered like a warning. Every step was sharp and steady, her heels hitting the floor like a countdown. She wore a dark navy suit that looked like it had been stitched. With purpose, no jewelry, no expression, just focus. Her eyes didn't scan the room. They locked on the main camera, the one feeding into homes across the country. She didn't smile. She didn't pause. She walked straight to her seat like she knew the storm didn't need thunder, it needed truth. The hearing had been called as a basic budget review. Nothing special on paper. Just numbers and schedules and policy. But everyone in that room knew. It was a lie. People had heard whispers for days about a sealed envelope, a missing clause, something hidden that shouldn't be. And now the whispers were breathing down everyone's neck. In Jasmine's hand was a red leather folder. Next to it, she laid down a single envelope, sealed in wax, edges frayed like it had been waiting too long to be opened. The wax was dark. Red, not bright, not polished, but deep, almost like blood. Donald Trump was already seated, slouched a little. One leg crossed, tie too long, face stretched into the smug grin the world had seen 1,000 times before. He looked bored, almost amused. On either side of him were lawyers, 3 men in suits that didn't move unless she did. One flipped. Through pages, another leaned in close and whispered something. And the last just stared at Jasmine like he already knew she wasn't here to play. She didn't come with stacks of notes. No slideshow, no sound bites, just the envelope and the folder. She adjusted the mic with one finger, exactly 1 inch. Then she leaned forward and asked a question, plain and steady. Mr. Trump, you've proposed cutting $4.2 billion from healthcare programs for low-income mothers. Was that number based on real budget analysis or polling at Mar-a-Lago? He let out a small laugh, smug and thin. You sound angry, sweetheart. Don't get emotional. A few of his aides chuckled. One even wrote something down, probably a joke for later. But Jasmine didn't laugh. She tapped her pen once on the table. The sound echoed like a gavel in a funeral home. The room froze. Then she leaned back slightly, calm but sharp. Let me rephrase, she said, her voice steady, almost too soft to carry, but somehow it did. Her hand moved closer to the envelope. Would you say the birth of your son was a private joy or a public investment? The air cracked. A staffer dropped their pen. Trump blinked. The camera lights seemed to flicker. The envelope just sat there, sealed. But now every eye in the room was stuck on it. This hearing is about budgets, she continued. But what we're about to discuss is a different kind of transaction. Trump sat back in his chair, smile still there, but tighter now. He glanced toward his lawyers. One scribbled something. Another shook his head. Jasmine lifted the remote beside her. Clicked at the screen behind her, lit up, a wire transfer appeared. Dated, labeled, $2.30. Million, she didn't say anything yet, and just before the room could process what it meant, we cut. End of intro. The screen stayed lit, the wire transfer glowing in silence. Jasmine didn't move. She let the number sit. $2.3 million bold, stamped, dated, single transaction, but heavy enough to change the entire tone of the room. She turned, slowly, letting her eyes scan the committee. Then she spoke, calm as ever. This transfer, she said, was made on March 4, 2005, just 7 weeks before the birth of Donald Trump's son. There were murmurs. A few lawmakers leaned forward. Someone whispered behind their hand. Jasmine paused for only a breath, then continued. This money came from an offshore account. It was sent directly into something called the Future Foundation Trust. On paper, that might sound like charity. But it wasn't for healthcare. It wasn't for education. It was for something else. She walked to the edge of the display and clicked again. A new slide appeared. A deposition, stamped, sealed. Signed, she held up the original. A folder thick with legal ink. This is from Alan Duca, she said, former senior accountant at the Trump Organization. In his testimony, he explained the real purpose behind the trust. The screen zoomed in. Jasmine didn't need to read it. She had already memorized it. If the child was male, she said, Melania would receive the full $2.3 million. If the child was female, nothing. The room changed. It didn't just go quiet, changed. Faces shifted. Jaws clenched. One aide dropped a tablet. Another just shook her head slowly. Phones lit up. Reporters typed with shaky fingers. CNN's lower third updated in real time. Trump IVF contract, $2.3 million for male child. Jasmine stayed. Steady. She clicked again. This time, a video filled the screen. The lights dimmed slightly. A face appeared, tight-lipped, tired, but clear. Michael Cohen, former fixer. Former loyalist, the timestamp and oath flashed briefly before the video played. In early 2005, he began, Trump told me directly he wanted an heir. Not just a kid, a boy. One that could carry the name and the brand, preferably with the right look. The room barely breathed. Jasmine didn't look away. Cohen's voice was low. Steady, he said, and I quote, "She'll get what she needs as long as I get what I want." The video cut to black. No one spoke. It was a single sentence, but it pulled the air out of the room. Trump shifted. His jaw tightened. One of his lawyers scribbled something hard onto a yellow notepad. Another looked pale. Jasmine turned back to the audience. He wasn't building a family, she said. He was building a brand. She walked to the table and opened the red leather folder slowly, as if it held something too heavy for one person to carry. Inside was the contract, dated January 2005, signed by Trump, signed by Melania. Jasmine. Read one line aloud. Clause C. Subject agrees to produce male heir. Payment of $5 million and estate property shall be granted upon successful delivery. Oh. A gasp rolled through the room. No metaphors, no guessing. Just a line written in legal ink. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This wasn't a love letter, she said. It was a blueprint. Trump looked frozen, like a man hearing a language he couldn't deny. His fists stayed on the table, but his shoulders had dropped. Like the weight of the words was starting to land, and then Jasmine reached for something smaller. A folded piece of paper, edges soft, ink faded. She opened it slowly. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "It's a letter," she said, "found in a sealed personal file. Written by Melania Trump. April 2009. She looked down and read, "There are nights I sit by the door to his room and listen to him breathe. He is small, perfect, unknowing. I wonder if he will grow up free or if he will become what they already say he must. Sometimes I wonder if I birthed a boy or a business plan." She stopped reading, no commentary, no follow-up, just that one line hanging in the air. Even Trump's lawyers didn't speak now. They sat frozen. Trump's eyes were locked on the letter, but he didn't interrupt. "Not yet, Jasmine." Folded the paper and placed it gently on the table. "That," she said quietly, is not a political statement. That's a mother speaking into a silence no one was supposed to hear. Trump finally reacted. He slammed his fist against the table. The microphones rattled. "Lies," he barked. "All of it. Lies." But no one turned to him. Not even the committee. Every eye was still on the screen behind Jasmine. She clicked again. A new graphic appeared. A chart. It wasn't dramatic till you read the names: BT Holdings, Trump Youth Legacy, LLC, Barron Ventures, shell companies, all tied to a child. Jasmine pointed to one. It was registered in 2006, the year Barron was born. Created before he could even walk, she said. Before he could speak, before he even knew what his name meant. Another company. Registered on Barron's second birthday. Listed address, Mar-a-Lago, South Wing. Unused office. The connections were everywhere. Not for education. Not for support, but for brand building. Each document was a brick in a wall of control. Each account a string tied around a boy's name. Jasmine stepped back. Her voice remained soft. "He never had a chance to just be a child," she said. "He was a plan." Long before he was ever a person. The screen behind her showed the names. Again, BT Holdings. Future Trust. Barron Initiative. One reporter whispered into their mic, barely able to say the words. This wasn't a family. This was a business plan. Atesa, and the conflict was only beginning. The lights dimmed again. Jasmine didn't say a word. She just reached for the remote, clicked once, and stepped back. The main screen flickered, then filled with black and white footage. The timestamp read March 24, 2017, 11:06 p.m. The camera angle was fixed, grainy, clearly from an internal hallway. A woman appeared in frame, barefoot, wearing a robe. Her face was unmistakable, Mela. She walked slowly down the marble corridor, stopped at a closed nursery door, and placed her hand on the knob. For nearly a full minute, she didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the door, as if the silence behind it said more than any word ever could. Then, gently, she turned the knob, peeked inside for just a second, and closed it again. Her hand lingered on the metal, then dropped. She turned and walked away, vanishing out of frame. No sound, no light, just a shadow moving through silence. When the footage ended, Jasmine stepped forward again. She didn't add drama. She didn't raise her voice. She asked one question, low and direct. What kind of mother signs away her voice, just to stay close to her child? Then she pressed the remote again. The screen showed a scanned document. Clear, cold, legally binding. Jasmine read the title. Aloud. Marital Insurance Rider, Trump Family Office, 2015. The clause was highlighted in yellow. If Melania, Trump initiates separation before November 9, 2016. The party of second interest, J. Trump, shall recoup 67% of all estate transfers and terminate her involvement in Trump legacy endorsements. A sound passed through the room, not a gasp, not a whisper, but the kind of low, slow breath people take when they realize something sacred has been broken. Jasmine didn't pause. She didn't stay because she was devoted. She said. She stayed because walking away meant losing her child, her safety, her voice, everything. And then it happened. Trump stood up, chair scraping loudly across the marble. His face was red, his mouth twisted, his chest rising too fast. He pointed a finger at Jasmine and yelled, "She loved me. She still does." His voice cracked mid-sentence. His lawyers stood quickly, trying to calm him, trying to get him back in his seat. But he wasn't listening. He shook them off, eyes wild, fists tight. "This is all lies. You're twisting everything." Jasmine didn't even blink. She turned, clicked again. And the screen changed one more time. It showed the final page of the original contract, the one everyone had already seen. Except this version had something new, something added by hand under the signature line. 3 handwriting experts had confirmed it belonged to Donald J. Trump. Jasmine read it out loud. "Control is protection. Silence is survival." DJT. Was it? She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. The camera zoomed in as people in the room sat stunned. Some of the committee members looked like they had seen enough. Others stared at the screen like they couldn't look away. Then the screen cut to one last video. A woman's face, blurred. Her voice altered and low. But the words came out sharp, with no hesitation. "I worked in the Trump household from 2006 until 2017, the woman said. "My job was to care for Barron." But care was never the word they used. It was always about control. The courtroom didn't move. The nanny continued. She didn't mother him, she performed him. Every time. There was a camera. She was told how to hold him, when to smile, how long to look at him. She looked like a mannequin with a pulse, and she looked trapped in that. The video faded to black dot. No one clapped. No one whispered. The silence felt heavier now, like the walls themselves were listening. Jasmine stepped back to the center of the room. Behind her, the screen showed a headline from CNN. "Marriage or merchandise?" Fox News had already cut to commercial. Twitter was on fire. TikTok clips from the hearing were already hitting 1 million views. YouTube channels were scrambling to repost the footage. The world wasn't watching anymore. It was reacting. Jasmine pulled up one last image, a photo of Barron Trump. He was about 4 years old, standing next to a velvet-covered podium, a red tie clipped too tight around his neck. His lips curved into a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wasn't looking at the camera. He looked lost, like someone told to stand still. Until it was over. Jasmine looked at the photo, then turned to the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She whispered. He didn't ask to be a brand. He just wanted to be a boy. And with that, the climax landed not like a bang, but like a weight falling through the floor. The moment the final image faded from the screen, the room broke open like a dam. Reporters rushed to send updates. Phones rang in every corner of the Capitol. Anchors were already talking over one another on live broadcasts. Outside, camera crews fought for better angles, and staffers who had been silent all morning now whispered frantically into phones. But Jasmine stayed still. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't reach for her water. It wasn't her moment. Anymore, it belonged to the people watching, those who had just seen more than they were ever meant to, far from Washington. In small towns and crowded cities, people sat frozen in front of screens. In a bakery in Ohio, 2 women stopped mid-conversation as the footage looped again on a mounted TV. In a high school in Florida, students watched in stunned silence while their teacher forgot to take attendance. On buses, in waiting rooms, in kitchens, people stared, not because it was news, but because it felt like something private had just been made public. Like they had seen behind a curtain that was never supposed to move. Jasmine finally reached for the last file. She didn't open it. She just placed it carefully into a black evidence case, flipped the brass clasp, and locked it with a soft click. Then she turned to the mic one last time. "You don't insure someone you love," she said quietly. "You insure something you expect to lose." Her voice didn't waver. It didn't need to be loud to be heard. Behind her, the screen remained dark. No charts, no names, no logos. Just silence. And that silence spoke louder than the shouting that had come earlier. She looked out, not at Trump, not at the committee, but through the lens of the main camera. Straight into the homes, the phones, the crowded lunchrooms across the country. Some of you will ask if this was legal, she said. Others will ask if he loved her. But neither of those questions matter as much as the one we should all be asking now. She paused. Let the quiet stretch. If a child becomes a campaign strategy, where does love and damned leverage begin? Nobody? Answered, nobody could, because that question didn't need an answer. It needed to sit in your chest. It needed to echo. Jasmine stepped back from the mic. The screen didn't change. No music played. No one clapped. Her heels tapped softly against the marble floor as she walked away. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like someone who didn't need to say another word. The sound of her footsteps was the last thing anyone heard. No soundbite could replace it. No headline could clean it up. It wasn't the kind of ending that wraps up clean. It was the kind that lingers. The kind that leaves you asking questions on the way home.